We've got with us former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney David Studdard, and criminal defense attorneys Jesse Law and Michael Bixon. Welcome to you all. I love the way the judge handled this today, because I don't like a judge who just sits there, does a little computation with numbers, and just reads a statement. No, this judge was trying to make an impact on a life here.
I agree. And look, from the beginning, this has been a series of trumped-up charges, a ridiculous. This case should never have been tried the way it was. I absolutely do not believe there was sufficient evidence for even probable cause, let alone a trial to take place on the charges that they had her on. And when I knew that they had convicted her on the abuse of a corpse, my initial concern is there going to be some sensibility now? Are they going to be putting her in prison, or are we actually going to see a sensible punishment? And I just am really thankful that we did see some sensibility from the court when he was able to give her the probation.
The judge could make comments that he wanted to make on the bench, but I think in this particular case, Judge Oda used the bench as his personal pulpit. He sat there and voiced his personal views on what he believed her actions were. The jury has spoken. The jury has said that she did not murder that child, that the child was stillborn, and that what she was found guilty of was the way she handled the child after it was born dead. And for him to say that this was a grotesque action on part, but that he didn't feel that what she did was proper, that was improper on the judge's part. I felt that if the judge wanted to make a comment, he should have said that the community is still moaning about this loss and so forth, but not to make such a derogatory comment on what she had to go through.
Well, here's the thing that I have learned over the years. A judge, when it comes to sentencing, is always your 13th juror. And you can tell from the sentence that a judge metes out what they really think about the case. He could have given her much more than he gave her. He could have put her in jail for a period of time. He didn't. Now, his rhetoric from the bench, I think what he's doing, he's pandering to his constituency. This is probably a case that garnered a lot of outrage from the Right to Life folks and a lot of ancillary groups that got involved in this thing. And from the bench, he's trying to ameliorate those feelings and pander to his constituency, while at the same time giving a sentence. He heard the evidence in the case. I absolutely
You don't think there's something here about a message to her and maybe to other folks who might be listening? Hey, if you're pregnant, see a doctor, do something. Don't stay there on your own and try to do what Skylar Richardson attempted to do here?
I absolutely believe that he was doing that, but I agree with the judge. I think it's a little gratuitous for him to get into all of that from the bench when he's handing out the sentence.
She was convicted of the abuse of a corpse. Abuse of a corpse. Let me just read what the law says on abuse of a corpse. And I think, let me get to the page, folks. Be patient, please.
It's a violation of the community standards.
Yes. A violation of the community standards. Absolutely.
Felony abuse of a corpse is a violation of the reasonable standards of a community.
Right.
She was not convicted of a misdemeanor offense, which is the reasonable sense of the family values. And that's where I still feel the judge, by using phrases like a grotesque and that you disregarded the care of the child and so forth, she was not convicted of being abusive to her fetus. She was convicted of what she did after delivery. And for him to characterize it the way he did, he was voicing a personal opinion from the pulpit.
No person shall treat a human corpse in a way that would outrage reasonable community sensibilities. As you said, he was voicing where the outrage was coming from, and he agreed with it. Now, there was another part of the sentencing I just have to show you, and this was a moment where Skylar Richardson actually spoke. I think she should have spoken a little bit longer based upon everything that happened here, but I thought she was extremely genuine in her remorse. Take a look.
Ms. Richardson, you get the last word in all of this. Is there anything that you want to tell me before I impose a sentence?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would do anything and above that you ask, and I understand. And I just wanted to say how sorry I was. I can sometimes be selfish, but I would like to think that I've become better in the knowledge that I've upset everyone and hurt so many people with what I've done, and I'm forever sorry, and I'm so sorry. I'm really, really sorry, and I understand, and thank you.
All right, so the question, when someone comes through the criminal justice system, will they come back? does she ever come back to the criminal justice system.
I can't imagine she's ever going to step foot in a courtroom ever again. I mean, this, you can see as the trial is going on how terrified this poor girl was. And I thought from the beginning, every one of these charges she should have been found not guilty on. Every one of them, including abuse of a corpse. And you could see even during the sentencing phase how terrified she was, standing there and shaking and apologizing to everyone, which I don't think she should have even had to do.
All right, I'll give you 10 seconds.
Skylar Richardson is a very young lady, and she was not prepared for the verdict, and she was certainly not prepared with a long speech. She articulated her genuine feelings the best way that she thought she knew.
All right, when we come back, there was another big issue in that courtroom today. Baby Annabelle's remains. Where should they go? The state was still holding on to them today. Who gets the remains? Skylar Richardson's family or the family of the baby's father?
I sent everyone else to do the normal Christmas traditions with our extended family, and then sent them to Southern Kentucky to visit all of my family, to do the same things that we always do. But this year I just couldn't do it. I couldn't stop thinking that this would be the first Christmas that she would love. She would have been into everything. Opening gifts all by herself, getting way too many toys than any child could ever play with, then probably playing with a box. But this would have been that Christmas. Not her first Christmas, but the first Christmas she would have been big enough to enjoy. And then it crushed me.
Today's sentencing didn't take long, but it was baby Annabelle's paternal grandmother who spoke the longest in court today. Longer than everyone, including Skylar Richardson, the attorneys, and the judge. She spoke the most, and for the first time we heard that perspective. And at the end of the proceedings today, there was an issue because baby Annabelle's remains have remained with the state. Never given back to the Richardsons, despite what was promised or indicated during those interrogation videos that was all about. You know, let us know what happened, we'll give you back the remains. Never gave them back. So today the judge had to make a decision on who gets the remains, and it was the father's mother who was asking that they get the remains. So the judge had to make a decision and released baby Annabelle to the family of Skylar Richardson with the promise that the Johnson family would be allowed visitation of the whatever site is. Let me bring back in my think tank on this. This was a real issue. Are you surprised, number one, that the judge in a criminal case is deciding what to do with remains?
I mean, it's, I guess, in a way, evidence, and the judge does have control over, the release of it and so forth. But there's the child's remains. It shouldn't have even been an issue. Just return them to the family. I mean, it's going to be buried.
Return to which family? The family of the mother or the family of the father?
It's going to be buried regardless, and so both families should have the right to visit this dead baby. I can't even imagine why this was an issue.
Even Skylar Richardson, who's been convicted of abusing that corpse one time, gets a second chance, no matter what.
Absolutely.
All right. Agree? Disagree?
Well, I agree. I think the family of the father's family would have to file some sort of petition in civil court to get custody of these remains, as sort of as macabre as that sounds, but that's what they'd have. Because other than that, I have no information whether or not this young man ever legitimated this child, which clearly he didn't because the child was not born alive. So he has no legitimate right to anything regarding this child. The law considers him but a stranger to this even unborn or now stillborn and deceased child.
The remains were removed from the defendant's property. The remains were still part of the defendant's possession. And I don't see in what universe that these remains would otherwise go to the non-custodial father. So, I mean, the best solution, I would think, would be to bury the remains at a public cemetery where both sides will have an opportunity to visit.
And that's what the judge was ordering today. And he let everyone know, if that doesn't happen, I need to find out about it. What if the family, though, wasn't satisfied with that? The family of the father wasn't saothisfied. If they hired their own attorney?
Well, there'll be an interesting case that we can talk about on Court TV as well.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. One other thing I just wanted to point out before we go here, and a lot of people were really concerned, and even the judge, that the actions of Skylar Richardson before that day. Any prenatal actions had no impact and could not be considered by this court. I was looking at the involuntary manslaughter statute in Ohio, and it says, no person shall cause the death of another or the unlawful termination of another's pregnancy as a proximate result of the offender's committing or attempting to commit a felony. So if someone else had caused that stillbirth, they could be held responsible for those actions. But if she causes the stillbirth, does not.
Plausibly, but none of that applies to the Richardson case. She was found not guilty of murder. She was not found guilty of in any kind of
Right, but what I'm
improper
saying is her actions during the time that she is pregnant could not be considered
At least for the involuntary
Involuntary
manslaughter.
for the
Right.
involuntary manslaughter.
Other charges, yes.
Only the third charge, only the charge of disposing of a corpse. Yet if someone else had caused that stillbirth, a third party, they could be held responsible. That, to me, that's what the judge was referring to during the sentencing. That, I can't consider anything that you did, even though I think if you had taken certain actions, that baby would be alive. But if it was someone else who had caused that stillborn, they could be held responsible.
Well,
Oh, yes. If Skylar was in a car and she was pregnant and someone else came and hit her car and unfortunately the fetus died, yes, that person could be guilty of that. But
not the mother.
Not the
Not the mother.
Right.
That's an interesting part of this. I want to make sure everyone understood that because I thought the judge was trying to explain that without really explaining it. So we took a look. All right, folks. I'm closing the book for tonight on the Skylar Richardson case. Of course, if there are any developments in it, through the months, the days, the years, of course, you'll hear about here on Court TV. When we come back, got 4 other big stories that we cannot ignore tonight. We'll talk about it when we come back.
Welcome to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice.
And we're doing what we do best and diving straight into our trial.
You have to look at everything in this case.
He murdered our daughter. Did you take the hose and squeeze it?
Guilty on all counts.
This is true crime all the time.
And you're not gonna miss a moment of it. That was really eye-opening.
This is what I love to do. All right, Desperate Housewives actress Felicity Huffman has been sentenced to 14 days in prison for a bribe to rig her daughter's SAT scores. Now, she is one of dozens of parents charged in the college admissions scandal. In the federal courthouse in Boston, she tearfully apologized to her teen daughter for not trusting her to get into college on her own. She told the judge, quote, "I was frightened, I was stupid, and I was wrong." Now, she pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit mail fraud and for paying the $15,000 to get her daughter in. She is now to report to prison on October 25th. All right, I have a few things to say about this whole scandal, just for a little background, folks. Just so you know, the ringleader of the whole thing, okay, his name is Rick Singer, made millions of dollars from all these really rich parents who were paying him money to get their kids into school. He was caught. He was one of the first people caught in the whole scandal. But no, the FBI continued with the investigation. And after getting the ringleader, they got all the other people involved, some of the parents and the coaches and the other people who were helped to facilitate this huge college admissions scandal, okay? My question is, though, who is the victim here? Who is the victim? Let me bring in my think tank. I've got prosecutor David Studdard with me, Jesse Law, Michael Bixon, criminal defense attorneys. Who's the victim?
I think, listen, I think anybody that has ever tried to send their child into another district school and that gets hammered for doing that, those are the victims. Those are the people that try to perpetrate these types of things, just everyday folks, and they end up getting creamed over that. It's hard to have any sympathy for Ms. Huffman. I mean, she's getting 14 days in jail and a fine that she can pay out of her pocket. So I think that's who your victims are, the people the everyday folks that do things similar and get absolutely crucified for it.
And to follow up with that, I think it's the process. I mean, having 2 children who had to go through tons and tons of practice on the SATs and so forth. There is a level playing field where everybody has to go through the same process, the same hardship, the same training, and it's indubitably unfair if somebody else can just whip out a their checkbook and say, well,
Absolutely unfair, despicable.
So it's the process that's victimized, and then during the process, there's all these other individuals who are playing by the rules, and then you have someone out there who's not.
Who's the victim?
Well, first of all, I'm inclined to agree with the judge. The issue is, do I think it was a federal offense? Should it have been? No, I don't think so. I think it was a trumped-up charge. I think it's ridiculous that she was charged in the first place. Not to say that what she did was right, because it was wrong. Now, as far as the victims, I think you could make an argument that it was the kids who didn't get in because they cheated the system to get their kids in. And the ones who didn't get in, who their children maybe have misplaced, could be the victim in this case.
Yeah, but when you read the actual legal papers and the indictments here, you know who they say the victims are? The schools.
The process.
The schools who are not policing their own admissions process. The schools who don't even know when they let someone in because they are supposed to be good, I don't know, at rowing or tennis, don't even check to see if that person can do it or is on the team.
Well, now you're victim shaming.
No, wait. But the schools are claiming that they are the federal government is claiming that the schools are the victims here. But the schools got full freight from the people that they let in without even really paying attention to who they're letting into their own schools. These are all private institutions, right? Right. Is there a federal commercial bribery statute? Is it illegal under our federal statutes to bribe someone at a private university? No, it's not. It's all mail and wire fraud that they get them on. I mean, what kind of prosecutor are you?
Criminal prosecutor. I mean, I do mainly, drugs and violent crimes.
In state court?
Federal Superior Court.
Superior Court. Okay, so this is the part of the case that really bothers me, is that the FBI is spending their time doing this instead of chasing, I don't know, sex traffickers, terrorists, drug lords. I mean, and we're chasing this? Couldn't this be dealt with in a civil court, right? If they found out and they got the ringleader, couldn't they tell the colleges, look, all this is happening, go and sue all these parents, kick these kids out of school?
You're preaching to the choir over here. So
okay, good. You're with me.
I'm agreeing with you.
Sure, someone who is guilty of tax fraud and evading paying their taxes. I mean, who really is the victim there? It's just the federal government, right? There's no
it's the rest of the taxpayers have to pay the rest of the bill.
Well,
I think in that case,
in the whole Washington thing, in the whole process of things, that but someone who did not pay his taxes, say, to the tune of $3,500. Who's going to be missing that $3,500? You, Vinny? Me, Vinny?
The government.
I don't know.
The government.
The government.
Who has to pay for everything that runs our country.
And in this particular case, by cheating on the rules on how to get into a university, they have basically cheated the process, the institutions.
But it's not a public process or a public institution.
Doesn't make a difference.
It's a private school.
It's a private school, but there are individuals, there are other students who have been playing by the rules, and they should have just as much an opportunity.
But they're not the victim. The school is the victim.
No, but the school has been defrauded by them misusing the process, and I think that's what they're alleging.
That the school
has been defrauded.
No, they've been cheated of the honesty of the coaches that they hired that they don't keep track of, who took the bribes.
But again, I mean,
that's the legal theory here. I'm looking at the legal theory, which hasn't been tested yet, because this is a guilty plea, right? What do we think happens for the people who aren't pleading guilty, or are actually going to challenge the government on these types of charges? What do you think happens?
Well, I mean, they're going to have to show and prove that these, first of all, you have to identify a victim. You can't prosecute a crime where you don't have a victim.
Right,
so
and the victim is going to be, in most of these cases, there's different charges for different people. The victim is the school. Do you think the jury is going to feel sorry for these schools?
Well, that's kind of what I was driving at. I mean, if that's your victim, I think you're not going to generate much sympathy with a jury when you say, poor Princeton or poor whatever the institution is.
Poor Yale, poor USC.
Right, because of people they hire and rely upon who turned around and sort of defrauded them, these folks got in.
And the key witness against all these parents is going to be the guy who made millions of dollars and ran the whole operation. This is like arresting El Chapo and then dragging in some of the street dealers and the users and having El Chapo flip over on the dealers and the users.
And how many times have they done that, though?
Never.
To be fair.
Never.
Well,
Never. El Chapo is, once you get El Chapo, you got El Chapo.
No.
You don't give El Chapo a deal to go after the users and the dealers of drugs,
As an extreme example, no. But I have seen that. In my career, I've seen that in cases where they flip people around. No matter what level of the scale they're on, I've seen them flip. So whether it's the head drug dealer down to the bottom drug dealer or the bottom drug dealer to the top drug dealer.
The drug ringleader flipping on the drug users?
The main El Chapo started this whole process, this whole network of deceit and fraud. And now you have all these parents over here who willingly participated, knowing that what they were doing was wrong.
Right.
And that's the process that's being
These parents were paying money, like a drug user pays money to get his drug or her drug to this street dealer who is the coach, who then gives the money to El Chapo, which is the ringleader here. The ringleader is going to be testifying against the parents.
Hey, that's the process, and the prosecution is going to use whoever's going to help them.
You think they win in these cases? Because it hasn't been challenged. Felicity Huffman did not challenge it. She took a deal.
Okay.
Right?
So let's
Some
see
of these other parents with extremely expensive lawyers, the best of the best, are going to challenge the government. Who do you think wins here?
Well, again, you know, I've said many times, criminal cases come down to jury selection. They get the right jury, and they certainly you have to have a victim, but they de-emphasize the victim in this case and emphasize the fact that you're talking about people that have advantaged themselves through power and privilege. That's how you generate sort of sympathy with the jury. They're going to have to do that. Otherwise, this notion that these Ivy League schools have been defrauded and they're the victim is going to fall on deaf ears, I think.
Okay, we've got some social media reaction to the Felicity Huffman case today. Lynn says, I think she got off easy. Even though she pled guilty, she should have been given more jail time. The rich seem to always get away with easy sentences. I hope they're going to make an example out of Lori Loughlin, Aunt Becky, and give her way more time for pleading not guilty. How do you think that works out?
I hear this a lot, where people have an issue with people who might have really good defense attorneys, and they say, oh, they got off light, because they're rich. And I think it's the other way around. I think they might have gotten a just sentence when the other people didn't. I think they might have gotten what was actually just and due when the people who might not be able to afford really good representation don't. I don't think it's that she got off light. She got what she should have gotten, So I think it's just a different way to look at it, really.
All right, Wen says, I think it should have been at the minimum 90 days. She took away dreams of deserving students by doing this. The victims, the families who follow the book, and the students of those families who work hard to get that spot. And I agree, Wen, and I agree with what you said. The true victims are the people who don't get those spots. But legally, those are not the victims in this case. The victims, again, are the schools. Elizabeth, I believe she was truly sorry for her actions. I think she should have only been fined and maybe house arrest. What do you think of the 14 days here?
Well, the government recommended 30 days. So she got far less than what, 30 days isn't that much either in the scheme of things, but she got much less than would have been recommended. So I don't necessarily have a problem with 14 days.
I think the damage was already done. So irrespective of whether it was 14 days or 4 days, here is a celebrity, a Hollywood actress, that she has been vilified in the media. The damage is already done. What more damage could happen to her whether she's in prison for 4 days or 14 days?
Yeah, I agree. And again, I don't agree with this conduct. This is outrageous conduct. None of these students should do one more day in all of these schools if that's the way that they got in. And the schools, if they feel like they truly are victims in these cases, should go to civil court. They all have tons and tons and tons of money. I know that for a fact. They could hire the best lawyers. They already have hired the lawyers for damage control here. But then go and sue all these parents if you feel like you've been victimized by them. Sharon writes, so she gets more time than Skylar Richardson, who killed her baby.
My goodness.
Well, there are so many problems with that statement, who killed her baby. I think the biggest issue there is she didn't kill her baby, and a jury decided that issue.
My goodness, it just comes from an individual who's looking at apples and oranges. Like you said, it's hard to frame a victim in the Felicity Huffman case, but it's easy to frame a victim in the Skylar Richardson case. And to put them together in the same basket, I think that was not a well thought out response.
Lawrence writes, desperate housewife or desperate college mom? This is interesting because there was actually an episode of Desperate Housewives where a very similar situation took place. Take a look.
To be honest, Mr. and Mrs. Scavo, your children's educational background is a bit more common than we would prefer. But Mrs. Van de Kamp mentioned that they were identical twins.
Yes, completely identical. You can't tell them apart. They're like bookends.
We do strive for diversity here at Barcliff. Identical twins could make for an interesting addition.
Apparently, we're in competition with one other family. A generous donation will ensure our kids beat them out.
How generous?
15,000.
That's the same amount. That's the same amount, $15,000. Do you see a difference between rich people who donate money to a private university versus these parents who paid money another way? And you make that donation to the private university and your child gets in? Is that okay?
It's the same thing. I mean, look, they're paying for play, right? They're paying to get them in. One way or another, it all leads to the same exact thing. Whether they're paying Joe off the street or they're paying the school director, it's the same thing. They're cheating the system by paying for the kids to get into school.
I disagree. If you're paying school a donation, then that particular student who got in got the SAT scores on his or her own merit. In this particular case, that student who took the SAT test the student who got into the university did not take the SAT test on his or her own
Gotcha.
merit.
And there are different charges with different people, and some were paying to have someone else take those SATs, and those are not their scores. All right, coming up, last year, this woman died from injuries from a corn rake. Investigators say it wasn't an accident. Her husband is accused of murdering her. More on Court TV's next big trial in just a few minutes. A case involving a corn rake as an alleged murder weapon is our next big case. Court TV will be in the Hawkeye State on Monday for Iowa versus Todd Mullis. Todd Michael Mullis is charged with murder in the death of his wife, Amy Lynn Mullis. Court TV's Ted Rollins took a look at what Mullis told investigators.
The affidavit, Todd Mullis and Amy Mullis were married in approximately 2004. Since their marriage, the affidavit says, Todd and Amy and their children have only lived in a house located in rural Delaware County. On November 10, 2018, at approximately 12:05 p.m., the Delaware County Dispatch Center received a 911 call from Todd in reference to his wife, Amy, being unresponsive. Todd stated that he and Amy and their 13-year-old son, TRM, were working in the North Hog building that day. Amy had surgery a couple days prior, and this was her first day out of the house. She was helping in the hog barn, and while cleaning light bulbs and fixtures, Todd stated that he had observed Amy while working, and she appeared to have dizzy spells. He says he asked Amy to go to a nearby shed and grab a pet carrier before she went into the house. Sometime later, according to the affidavit, he looked outside and didn't see the pet carrier where he had instructed Amy to put it. So he instructed TRM, his son, to go check on Amy and see what she was doing. Todd stated that he heard TRM yell for him. He ran a short distance to the shed and observed Amy lying in a crouched position just inside the doorway with a corn rake impaled in her back. He attempted to take Amy out of the building, but the corn rake that was lodged in her back was hitting the fertilizer crates. He then stated that he laid Amy down and pulled the corn rake out of her back. According to the affidavit, he then said he placed Amy in his pickup and with his son drove towards Manchester Hospital. He says he called 911 on the way to the hospital, and medical services reached Todd and moved Amy from his pickup to an ambulance. Amy was then transported to the Regional Medical Center in Manchester and was pronounced dead.
Now, Mullis says he believes Amy Lynn fell on that corn rake, but prosecutors say Mullis' story just doesn't add up. And here's why. Take a look. This is what a corn rake looks like. It has on it 4 prongs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yet, there were 6 puncture wounds in Amy Mullis' back. 2 were at an upward angle and 4 were at a downward angle. So here's my conclusion. 6 minus 4 here equals murder. My think tank is back with me. This, to me, is the most important part of this case. Simple mathematical equation. 6 puncture wounds, 4 prongs on the corn rake equals murder, not an accident. How do you get an accident like that?
It's going to be difficult to come up with one, but ultimately I think it's going to come down to the forensics and experts that can show, at least for the defense, some type of reasonable theory as to something else that could have happened, some type of reasonable accident that you can explain with this, whether she fell on it once, got up, fell back down on it on a different angle. It's a difficult thing to explain for the defense. There's no question about it.
This is a great case for prosecutors.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Michael. You're going to have to show that in order for that defense to fly, you got to show that she fell on this thing, wounded herself, got up, fell back down, and mortally wounded herself. I mean, the only conclusion you can draw from this, I think, logically, is that it was thrust into her, pulled out, and thrust in again. And I think that's probably what the crime scene work's going to bear out.
It'll be interesting because unless the CSI has got holographic video and graphics and so forth, I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult for the state to prove this case. I mean, other than the motive of her having an affair from, what, 2 years ago?
Wait, let's start here first. Accident versus murder.
She was recovering from surgery. She was dizzy that day. We have no idea where this pitchfork or rake was located.
Right, but can we look at the numbers? 6 puncture wounds, only 4 prongs on a corn rake.
We have no idea whether she fell, landed on 2 of the prongs, got up, felt dizzy again and fell. I mean, there's so many theories that can be conjured up from what possibly happened.
Okay,
it's going to be an uphill battle for the state to prove that Mullis killed his wife with that rake beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, first I wanted to go from accident to murder. I haven't gotten you all the way there, but I think I've gotten 2 there. Let's talk about motive, because when it comes to motive, that's who could have done this murder. Again, Ted Rollins took a look at the arrest affidavit.
According to the affidavit, on November 16th, 2018, law enforcement re-interviewed Todd. Todd told law enforcement that in approximately 2013, Amy had had an affair with another man. Todd said his son had learned of the affair and that the 2 of them, Todd and his son, had grown closer because of the incident. Todd admitted he had confronted Amy a second time about the possibility of her having an affair. Todd told law enforcement around July of 2018 he reviewed his cell phone billing statement and discovered a large number of text messages being sent and received between Amy and a man known to Todd. Todd said he also called the man's wife, and she denied any knowledge of her husband having an affair with Amy. Todd told law enforcement following his conversations with Amy, the man, and the man's wife, he believed that there was no relationship. Law enforcement learned that Amy did enter into a romantic relationship in 2018.
All right, how about this for a motive? One, you've got marital problems, suspicions that she's cheating on him again. Doesn't want to get a divorce because then he's going to lose half of that farm and about $2 million.
Yeah, but I think 2018, though, that's the biggest issue for the state. This affair has happened and done with.
The first one, but the suspicions of the second one.
Yeah, but you're
in
still
2017.
Yeah, but again, we're in, 2019. There was some time that happened between.
No, he's checking the phone in the summer, and this happens shortly thereafter.
November.
The suspicions, yeah.
To me, it's a little bit of a stretch.
All right, you're not buying the motive.
No.
You like the motive for the prosecution?
I love the motive. I think it's a great motive. You don't get over an extramarital affair in 1 year, 2 years, sometimes even 10 years, sometimes a lifetime. Who knows what dynamic was going on between these two? This thing dusted back up in 18, or at least he suspected that she was doing it. He's probably confronting her about this thing. The motive is there.
Yeah, and there are some allegations and some evidence that the prosecutor's going to try to present that they were together until her death. The boyfriend, the alleged boyfriend from this third. All right, still don't have you. Let's talk about internet searches. Can we do that? Let's take a look at some internet searches. Here's from January 8th, 2018, an online search that has been uncovered by investigators. And again, these are searches allegedly made by the defendant. Once you hunt, man, you always feel the thirst, thrill of the kill. Famous quote, no thrill like that of a hunting man. Any problems with that? Is that easy for the defense to deal with?
Oh my goodness, what is the implication? Is that he likes to hunt and that,
It's
bizarre. I mean, you're trying to say that because he did these Google searches, therefore he's out there looking for blood and he's just like planning that very special day when she has a surgery and she's frail and he's got a strategically placed corn rake in there and that he would plan this whole murder?
Look, I mean,
wow.
If the internet search was how to kill someone with a corn rake, I'd say he'd have some serious issues, but that's just some weird...
Let me get to one more. I'll get to another internet search. This one, May 10th of 2018. This one may be a little more on point for the defense. Killing unfaithful women. What happens? Cheaters in history. What happened to cheating spouses in historic Aztec? A little more worried about that one?
A little bit more worried, yeah.
You like that one as a prosecutor?
I like that one as a prosecutor, yes.
That one doesn't help. It doesn't help.
It puts
There's
a seed
no question
of
about
thought
it.
in his brain. You still have to get it from a seed of thought to execution of that particular plan.
I have one more.
Oh dear, there we go with that.
Lay it on us, please.
Just days before she died. Let's take a look at the last search. Organs in the body. Organs in Wikipedia. Body organs in sciencetrends.com. Locating a map of the organs in the body, where they're located.
Has that anything to do with the surgery she just had?
Maybe.
There we go.
Or maybe where the prongs from the corn rake ended up.
It's possible, but again, like Judge Law said, maybe it had something to do with her surgery because we know that she had surgery, she was taking medication, she was dizzy. Another reasonable explanation as to what could have happened.
It's hot.
I absolutely did. I think the defense is going to have a real uphill battle with this case. This is already becoming a mountain of evidence.
And the motive is both the cheating and the money. You got this family trust fund, this family money. She could get $2 million there, half the farm. She was scared. You worried?
She also could have just fell. Just saying.
All right. Is it
It's
reasonable?
possible.
It's a tough uphill battle to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. But then again, I don't know Iowa juries. Who knows?
Life with the possibility of parole. You take that deal?
I got to see how the forensics come out. Honestly, to me, the key in this case is the forensics and see what the experts say. Because if they can actually recreate how the murder happened, then I'd really strongly consider that deal.
How worried are you, though, about the boyfriend, the victim's boyfriend, coming into court testifying about this ongoing affair?
That might be a problem, but it will they still need to boil down to how this particular murder was executed. You can't be based on just mere speculation.
All right. Another aspect of this case that is really troubling is that the 13-year-old son is the one who finds him in court, deciding how he's going to testify, by video or actually in the courtroom. What's the appropriate way for that to take place?
Well, we hope it's going to be an in-camera inspection, or it could be in chambers with the judge, the counsel, and so forth, and a court reporter. That's also a possibility. Certain times, children that age do come into open court and testify as well. Yeah. 13 years old, in this state, you could be convicted of a major felony if you're 13.
So, in this case, the 13-year-old becomes a crucial witness in the case, and the defense is going to have to cross-examine him. The prosecution has to walk him through everything. How much preparation does it take? How do you even get ready to do that? How do you prepare a 13-year-old who's lost his mother and he's testifying for the state? Does he even understand that his testimony could help put his father in prison for the rest of his life?
Yeah, you have to be very careful with that. You just encourage him to tell the truth. That's all you do. You don't try to coach him up. You don't try to. You prepare him environmentally for what he's likely to face in a courtroom. You know how it's going to look, that kind of thing. But as far as you put him on the stand and you let him tell his story, and that's all you can do with him.
And that's the true heartbreaking part of this
Absolutely
case. And there's two other children, but he has to testify. He's the one who found his mom. All right, when we come back, there's another case that we're tracking, another story we can't ignore. Jury selection underway in Texas versus Amber Geiger. Who is she? She was the police officer who says she went to the wrong apartment and shot an accountant who was just at home eating. That is next.
Everything you love about Court TV is now a podcast.
Let's figure this whole thing out.
Yes.
Join Vinny Politan and Seema Iyer for this week's new episode of the Court TV podcast. Available now wherever you listen to podcasts.
This is true crime all the time.
And you're not gonna miss a moment of it. That was really eye-opening.
This is what I love to do.
Former Dallas police officer who killed an unarmed black man in his home 1 year ago. 31-year-old Amber Geiger is charged with murder in the shooting death of 26-year-old Botham Jean. Geiger had just finished a 15-hour shift and was still in her uniform as she entered an apartment that she mistakenly believed was hers.
It is murder because if the roles had been reversed and Botham had come into her apartment and killed her, he would be under the jail right now and charged with capital murder.
Then she saw a man inside. She says she thought he was an intruder, and she fired her gun twice.
So far, this officer, instead of being arrested that night as she should have been, being placed in handcuffs and taken to jail, she was allowed to contaminate that scene that they're now allegedly discovering incriminating evidence completely unrelated.
One of the bullets hit Botham Jean in the chest as he stood up from his couch where he was watching TV in his living room. Botham Jean later died in the hospital.
We will not rest. This family cannot rest until justice is served.
That shooting sparked outrage and protests across the country as some believed it was racially motivated.
We are saying there's not justice at all if there is no justice for all.
Geiger could face life in prison if she's found guilty of murder.
This case has garnered national attention and emotions in Dallas, Texas as well. A really important case, and a case that is scheduled to begin with testimony in a couple of weeks on the 23rd. Of course, Court TV will be covering that for you. In the meantime, as we sit here now, jury selection still ongoing in Texas. Let me bring back in my think tank. And first question I have for a case like this: white police officer, black victim, jury selection. How important is race?
Extremely important. I mean, you're going to be having all that racial tension there. You're going to be questioning the jurors about how do you feel that the alleged victim is of this particular ethnicity. You also want to look at the makeup of the jury and make sure that it's fair and you don't have any challenges, because clearly, I mean, it would be patently clear that this is a racially tense trial.
Right, but lawyers are not allowed to consider race in the selection of a jury. That's illegal, isn't it?
But background they can. And I think that's the most important thing, is where the person comes from and their background, right? I think that race does play a part in it, right? But whether or not you can actually use that is a different story. I think a person's background you can definitely use, that without question.
So how do lawyers dance around that? Because honestly, I understand. I've spoken to lawyers, and they look at the color of the skin of potential jurors, but you can't consider that legally when striking jurors out of the jury pool. What's the reality of how we get a jury in a case like this?
Well, you have to craft questions in voir dire that are designed to flesh out these racial biases. I mean, you can't exclude jurors based on their race, but you can certainly exclude jurors based on racial bias if they display that during the questioning, and that's going to be their challenge.
That's the clearest answer to that question that I have heard in all my years of doing this, and I've done a lot of cases like this and asked lawyers about it, and that one makes sense. And that you want to make sure that you have jurors who are not looking at color. You want jurors that can be unbiased when it comes to the racial aspect. Has nothing to do with the color of their skin.
Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a long and intense process, because flushing out those racial biases will require a certain skill that, you're not trying to insult the juror, but you want the juror to be forthright about where they feel that they would be otherwise biased against or biased for.
Are jurors in a high-profile case like this, and everyone in Dallas knows this case, and that's where the jury's coming from, are the jurors honest?
We hope so.
Well, I hope so, and I believe in our system, and I trust those jurors when they're there. But during the jury selection process, how is a lawyer? How good of you? How easy is it to find those people who aren't being honest with you?
It is difficult. It is like pulling teeth because no one wants to admit a bias. No one wants to be that person that says, you know what, you're right. I can't be impartial here. And that's a tough thing to say, especially in front of other people in a courtroom. No one wants to be that person. And some people definitely know they're that someone, and that's why they want to be on there. And you got to be even more careful to look for those kind of people.
The stealth juror who has an agenda coming in. Have you ever dealt with a stealth juror?
Absolutely, and they're very difficult to flesh out. I appreciate more, it's horrific. I've sat on, or I've been involved in a jury trial before where the question about race is asked and several hands go up and they say, I cannot be fair because the defendant is a black man or the reverse of that. It's horrific, and those people obviously are taken off the jury, but I would prefer that certainly than to a stealth juror trying to, with an agenda, getting on my jury.
Absolutely. Now, the other part of this case is it's a police officer, is the defendant. So where are we right now in society with police officers being charged as a criminal defendant? Is that an advantage or a disadvantage right now?
It's a disadvantage. It's not a pretty picture for the law enforcement right now. We just had someone who has been indicted and convicted of murder in a particular case. And then we have all these cases of police brutality and shootings all over the country. And now we have an individual who allegedly walked into an apartment. It turns out to be the wrong apartment, and then puts 2 bullets into someone who was legally occupying his own domicile. I mean, the whole picture just reeks of tragedy.
You know, when I look at this, do you think that a police officer, because years ago, and I've covered a lot of trials with police officers, it seems that they do well at trial. And most of the cases are police officers who are on duty. This is a police officer who is just finishing her shift. It's been reported somewhere between 13 and 15 hours. Still has her uniform on, but she's not responding to a call. She's not investigating anyone. She is simply going home or ends up at Botham Jean's apartment. Does that change the equation at all, or is this jury still going to see a police officer?
They're still going to see a police officer. It should change the equation, but it won't. She's in her uniform. She was a Dallas police officer. That's what people see. Mm-hmm. That's what all of this is about. If she was not a police officer, yeah, it'd be an emotional case, but it wouldn't be near to the level it is now.
All right, the top charge is murder, right? So there's really 3 choices for this jury: murder, manslaughter, or not guilty because it was a tragic accident. That's what the defense says. The prosecution says murder. Looking at this case and the circumstances surrounding, what does your gut tell you is the most likely conclusion based on the facts? And obviously the trial hasn't been tried yet, but based on the facts that someone is at an apartment and somehow gains entry to that apartment, we don't know how, and ends up shooting that person. And it's the wrong apartment, but was she purposely there? Is there a motive? Could there be a why? Do you need to know why to convict her of murder?
What? Go ahead.
The only evidence we have that the door was ajar. She says she got off on the wrong floor because she parked at a different level in her apartment building. She thought she was on the right level, but actually she was on the wrong level. And she went to the apartment that is directly above her.
Directly above her,
right.
exactly.
So, in terms of proximity to the parking deck, she thought she was walking to her own apartment. But then I guess there's some evidence that the door was ajar, that she tried to, that should, I guess, to her, law enforcement trained mind, she was thinking, oh, I have an intruder in my property because I always lock my door. So she must have already gone into the darkened room.
If the door was ajar.
If the door was ajar.
Right. It's not really clear yet. There's a gag order on the case. It's not clear how she gains entry. But if the door is ajar and she goes in and the jury believes she thinks she's in the right apartment, is that murder?
I think they got an uphill battle with intent. I mean, if they're going to charge her with murder and try to convict her for murder, you've got to show that she formed the requisite intent to take this man's life. I don't think they're going to be able to do that. I think the jury is probably going to come down somewhere in the neighborhood of manslaughter. How they get to that, I don't know. And again, there's a lot about this case.
There's a lot that we still don't know about this case. All right, coming up, we take a look at the newest addition to Court TV's Trials on Demand. It's the Vegas robbery caper, Nevada versus O.J. Simpson.
The
Hall of Fame football player lured 2 sports memorabilia collectors to the hotel because they had autographed pictures and other items that he claimed were stolen and were his. Orenthal James Simpson was back in the legal spotlight, arrested again.
And this guy came over and ordered me at gunpoint to pack the items up in the boxes we brought him in. I refused.
The state says that Simpson himself not only knew that guns would be used during the robbery, but had told others to bring them along. Simpson says he was only taking back what was stolen from him when he went into this Las Vegas hotel. He said he had no idea guns would be involved.
14 years after the so-called trial of the century, jurors will be forced to distinguish mementos from murder.
I stand before you today, sorry, somewhat confused.
Nobody out this wants you to hang that motherfucker. Like you can steal my don't let nobody out here. You motherfucker.
We're going to explore and discover and expose the true face, the hidden face of Mr. Simpson in this case.
You can think whatever you want about his past, and you've all agreed as jurors to ignore it. This is a case about recovering photographs, personal mementos.
What did Mr. Simpson say?
He said, "Yeah, man. I just need you all to bring the guns, but you don't have to take them out."
Tom, there was no gun. Don't say there's a gun because there was no gun. And I'm like, OJ, I already told him there was a gun. There was a gun a few inches from my face, and I saw it.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're the jury in this case, and the final story is going to be told by you.
Count 1, conspiracy to commit a crime, guilty. Count 2, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, guilty. Count 3, conspiracy to commit robbery, guilty. Count 4, burglary while in possession of a deadly weapon, guilty.
That trial now available on CourtTV.com. Trials on Demand. It's Nevada versus O.J. Simpson. Remember, that's the one where he was actually found guilty. Take a look at O.J. here, standing before the judge and apologizing.
So now, Mr. Simpson, go ahead and stand.
Yes, Your Honor, I stand before you today, sorry, somewhat confused. I feel like apologetic to the people of the state of Nevada. I've been coming to Nevada since 1959. I worked summer jobs here for my uncle in 60 and 61, and I've been coming ever since, and I've never gotten in any trouble. People have always been fine to me. When I came here for a wedding. I didn't come here to reclaim property. I was told it was here. When he told me that Monday that the stuff was in Nevada, when he knew I was going to be in Nevada, I called my kids, I talked to my sisters, I called the Brown family, and I told them I had a chance to get some of our property back.
That was 2008. O.J. Simpson was found guilty, sentenced to several decades in prison, but got out after just 7 years in prison. So what is O.J. Simpson up to these days? Well, he lives in Nevada because that's where he's on parole and spends a lot of time on the golf course. Also spends some time on Twitter giving legal analysis. Take a listen.
And of course, they're talking about Antonio Brown and the rape allegations. And I'm listening to these sportscasters. All of a sudden, they become crime reporters. And I heard this one guy make an idiotic statement that the girl is obviously moral and all that. And she might be. I'm not saying she's not. But they said because she's only asking for $75,000. And I'm saying to myself, Jesus, why don't these sports guys just talk about sports? The law is in federal court that she has to ask for a minimum of $75,000. Make no mistake about it. This girl ain't sending herself through all of this for $75,000. So stick to what you know. Don't talk about what you don't know. I'm just saying. Take care.
O.J. Simpson, expert on the law, and he's actually right. 28 U.S. Code 1332. The district court shall have original jurisdiction of all civil actions where the matter in controversy exceeds the sum or value of $75,000. Let me bring back in my think tank. There's one thing I know about O.J. Simpson is, at least years ago, he used to watch Court TV all the time. I don't know if he's watching these days or not. But he has really taken, an affinity towards the law because of his background. And I'm not going to talk about O.J. now, but just clients in general. Do you find that ex-cons tend to become more familiar with the law and what it is, take more of an interest in it, or do they just move on, most ex-cons?
Oh, no, they have time and they have opportunity. They have resources in the penitentiary or in the prison system where they can read up on the law. They can have also internet research. They may research information that's relevant to them, or they may, click on and find other interesting topics. We've had prisoners who've graduated and become lawyers once they finish their term. So